Alright, guys. Welcome to the stream. We'll give a few minutes for people to trickle in.
Howdy, everyone.
So, on today's video stream, live chat. Good morning, Carson. Thanks for joining. We are going to be talking about the points that just dropped on Thursday? Friday? What day of the week was it? Doesn't matter. A few days ago. The absolutely massive nerf that they gave Black Templars. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't that bad. It was a nerf, but I guess it could have been worse. I mean, we are the best Space Marine faction. Some of the detachments with us are, outside the Goldilocks zone. In particular, Gladius and especially Ironstorm was like 65%. So, we're going to pay for the sins of Ironstorm with this points update. Now, that being said, Space Marines in general did get some drops, which can help balance that out. Some things got cheaper, including one of my favorite units. Let us know, guys, in the comments. Bob's got a new computer. We made some adjustments. I know we've had some issues in the past with audio on the live streams. I want to make sure we both look, sound good. Volume is appropriate for both of us. So please let us know in the comments if we're having issues. That way we can correct it early on. All right, guys? So, let me get the Meticulous Chaos says, do you think they will ever balance divergent chapters with the core book to make them just not Space Marines extra? It's kind of hard to not do that, you know what I mean? Because at the heart of it, we are Space Marines plus extra because we have our own stuff. Can it be done while keeping divergent chapters competitive? I would venture to say that the divergent chapters are more competitive than vanilla Space Marines. I think what needs to be done to make vanilla Space Marines better is difficult to say because we have access to all those same things. And it's hard to get around that without lots and lots of restrictions, which could, in turn then nerf the divergent chapters. So, I don't know. That's a good question. What are your thoughts, Bob?
I think right now, like, the vanilla is something that is very good by itself, with the exception of maybe one in Vanguard, Ultramarines Vanguard. Everything else relies on the divergent chapter, so it makes it really kind of tough. You're going to be taking out a lot of the flavor of the faction in general if you balance it all together, I think, simply because there a lot of the rules and such come from the different factions. But you have your Ultramarines. I feel like they attempted to do this with the Codex Space Marines. Now, what they could do, or could have done, and say, hey, if your faction is not in this book, you can't use these detachments, and that would have made it more so that you have to roll with the vanilla chapters. But they obviously made that design choice not to do that. So basically, we have the plus up on that.
Yeah, I think the problem with doing that is then you're limiting like Black Templars to one detachment versus Space Marines get six. I mean, that's not really fair. Same thing with Dark Angels. They only got three detachments in their book. So now they have half as many detachments as regular Space Marines. I mean, granted, at least one, two, three of those detachments in Space Marines are bad. you know, the White Scars one, what's it called, Stormlance, the First Company one, and Anvil are not good detachments. So you have those, um, and the problem is then like uh, the White Scars one, the Stormlance one, it focuses heavily on mounted. We only have two mounted units left, plus one character. I mean, half the stuff in the book is about mounted, or in the detachments about mounted. The only chapter that really benefits from that would be Ravenwing and Space Wolves because they have a bunch of their own mounted units. So I think if you do that, now you are hampering those chapters even more. And until we get like some sort of semblance of decent mounted units, because let's face it, uh, all of our mounted units in vanilla Space Marines, you know, aren't good. I mean, Outriders are usable. I think they're 80 points, which is pretty cheap for what they do. But they're not a damage dealing unit. They're basically like a secondary monkey action monkey unit. Um, so they're not gonna do what the detachment wants them to do. So unpopular opinion: give all Divergent chapters their own book that does not require the core codex. I mean, that's another way to go about it. I don't think Black Templars need six detachments. Certainly not. I don't even know how we would do more than the one we have. To be honest with you, I mean, vows is our thing. What else would they give us? Is kind of That's kind of what I've been wondering. Is I guess it's possible. This would really this would be really kind of out there, but this is something I thought of. Is they gave us four detachments, and then all four detachments have the same enhancements with the same points costs. And then you, instead of choosing a vow at the beginning of the game, you choose a detachment. And each detachment is specific to a vow. So, like, you'd have Suffer Not or Uphold the Honor detachment. And you'd have different stratagems, and the enhancements would be all the same, except that they would each do something different in each detachment. So there'd be like four things. In this detachment, it does this. In this detachment, it does that. So that way you could choose at the beginning. That would be a really weird mechanic for GW, and I don't think they could pull it off. It would also be really weird and out there, for 40K in general. So, and outside the box on how armies are built. So, but yeah, I don't know what they're gonna cook up for us. Um, and honestly, that's the thing: is do we even want a codex at this point? After seeing most of the Imperial codexes just be absolutely nerfed, I don't know that I want one right now. I wouldn't mind being the last codex at this point. What do you think, Bob?
I still want one eventually. I feel like 10th edition has been kind of a little bit of a sandbox for them so far, where they're kind of testing it all because they know what they did in ninth edition. They want to fix that problem, and overall, they've done a really good job of making sure that everything stays balanced and being quickly responsive to things. But their codexes were written before all of that balancing has been done. So we kind of want to make sure that we're getting written right now instead of it was already done and play tested and already getting printed off somewhere. So I'm kind of with you on that so that we have a more balanced book and we're not going to get, you know, they say codex creep, but
It's Codex
it's
Sleep.
codex shrink.
Codex
Yep.
Sleep. Meticulous says the gladiators and impulsors for Templars should cost the same as other chapters. They should just get a point increase if the multi-multi is included. Yeah, I mean, but that kind of goes against GW's whole mantra for this edition, which is no war gear costs, even though it's really a war gear cost. Um, Honestly, uh, I think 5 points is was fine. I realize other they were using them in other detachments, um, where that multi melta might benefit more from like something like Ironstorm in particular because you get that extra reroll that you wouldn't otherwise, which helps the multi melta a lot. Um, I would rather than the points for those go up. I'd rather they just say you can't take a Black Templar tank outside of Righteous Crusaders. These 3 unit, these 5 units or whatever the however many they are, you can only take the Black Templar tanks in the Black Templars detachment, which would diverge from what they have been doing. But you know, that would be fine with me because it would allow them to stay cheaper. But in any case, so speaking of which, shall we get on with some points here? So give me just a minute.
Yeah, so we got a couple of sets of points that we're going to go through here for sure.
Yep.
Um,
So let me get the thing up so everyone can see it. All right, there we go. Oh, meticulous. No worries. I mean, that's kind of what the main purpose of these live streams is to chat with the community and talk about what you guys want to talk about. We always have a kind of a topic in mind, just so that if no one has any questions or or things they want to ask, we have something to talk about. But absolutely not derailing. It's the purpose for our live streams every month is to talk with you guys. Um, so the Munitorium Field Manual version 1.8. So here we are. Let's get right into. We're gonna skip past these other chapters that nobody likes and go straight into uh, the Black Templars. So here we are. It's nothing but red. As we mentioned, the Lancer, the Reaper, Valiant, and Impulsor all went up another 5 points. So now those multi-metals cost us 10 points, which, if we're not using the Righteous Crusaders, that adds up. It's significant. If you're taking 2 Lancers and 2 Impulsors, now you're looking at 40 points. So yeah. The Crusader squad went up another 10 points. This is the basic Crusader squad, the firstborn one. Note that it's only the 5-man that went up. So if you take 10, which you're never going to, it stays the same. They're 75 per 5 at that point. But there's no point to ever taking 10 because you get no benefit from it. Otherwise, besides 5 extra bodies, which you don't need. Because that's not why we were taking them. We were taking them because they were a cheap 5-man squad with 2 special weapons. So, and then my beloved Sword Bros went up 10 points as well. I kind of feel like this was a little undeserved. I know that they are probably the most deadly unit in the game with the appropriate characters attached. But I don't know. They're not super durable. I think they were fine at 140, but here we are. So what are your thoughts, Bob, on these changes?
we go 3 months down the road, and we were talking about the Crusader squad probably needing to be 80 points. 85 points is probably the death knell that they unfortunately needed to make them not useful for Ironstorm. But unfortunately, we have a pivot that's going to happen with the Iron Storm. They're just going to go to Dark Angels and go that route. But I don't mind the Gladiator 5 up points on those differing things. Yeah, kind of sucks to pay another 10 points over the standard, but when you think about it, the multi-melta has generally speaking been 10 points in previous editions, and we've paid it.
Yeah,
What
but
hurts the most on is the impulsor, and I agree that they could have gone about it a different way. Just don't use these in other detachments, and then make it more cost effective. But I mean,
you know, in previous editions though, Melta was really good into tanks. Now it's like potato into tanks. Like if you get a lucky shot through, you could do a bunch of damage, but you got to be lucky because you're wounding most everything on fives. Any kind of serious tank, you're going to be wounding on fives. It's really only good into sort of some monsters and light vehicles now. So 10 points with a shortened range. It's only 18 inches now. Um, is really kind of I don't think it's worth 10 points, to be honest. I mean, I'll take them because I have to in Righteous Crusaders, but it's one of those things that's like, I don't know. I feel like I said, we're paying for the sins of Iron Storm. So
and unfortunately, you know, all of my tanks have multi-meltas glued onto them, so they're kind of stuck now.
just kind of stuck with them.
Now we
So
get to the Primaris Sword Brethren, and I love them. I love them dearly. I've been talking about the units
don't say
for
it, Bob.
a long,
Don't say it,
long
Bob.
time.
Bob, don't say it.
A long,
Don't say it.
long time. But I think they're almost to that point. They're at the line where I consider them taking them in Righteous Crusaders. They're kind of spendy now.
I am taking them 100% still in Righteous Crusaders. No question about it. 10 points does not deter me. They're so deadly with Helbrecht, with the Emperor's Champion, with the Judiciar, especially with Helbrecht. You got to have a squad with Helbrecht because he just turns them up to 11, and they turn him up to 11, and they're like you can with lethal hits. Helbrecht and 5 sword bros will kill a Catan. So that's nothing to sneeze at, and that's something that I think that it makes them worth taking. So I'm gonna disagree with Bob on this one. They're 100% still worth taking, and I would not leave home without them except in like a very like skew list.
So now you're jumping to conclusion. I just said they're
You're
approaching the
yeah.
line that I would consider not taking them. Um, so we're going to kind of dig into it a little bit deeper, but I'll give kind of a little bit of preview where I'm at. So most of the followers of the channel kind of know what type of lists that I typically use. I am an MSU. Um, so I take the Impulsor Sword Brethren combo with character. Now, that's less feasible, I think, in combination of all the other nerfs. So the Impulsor, the Sword Brethren, those went up. So ultimately, I'm looking at a 15-point nerf for each unit that I'm taking, not just the one. So if you're investing in something like the Land Raider, Redeemer, Helbrecht combo, great. It's you, obviously you took a point increase on it, but it's something that's a dedicated something you're building around it in your list. That's fine. I just think that the impulsors, you're taking multiple units like I was, you're taking a pretty hefty increase in points. And like I had to look at my list. I'm like, should I? Now, with that being said, they're still exceptional. They're still good value for the points that there are, but I had to look at my list in general and be like, oh man, now I have to make a decision here. What am I going to drop? Because my list was humming and it did everything it needed to do. And now I have to make these decisions. I have to lose something. Oh, that sucks. So I think they're getting to that point. If they go up any more, then I'm definitely looking at them side eye.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go up anymore, to be honest. I was really surprised they went up at all this time, like I said. But Grand Enforcer is asking why, any thoughts on why PCS didn't go up, Primaris Crusader squads? They're still cheaper and more dangerous than Assault Intercessors. So, yes, they're cheaper, and yes, they're more dangerous. But also remember that 4 of their guys have a 4-up save. And their sergeant is weak sauce. So while they do have 2 power fists over Assault Intercessors, not, and they do have more attacks, Assault Intercessors do get rerolls. So there is that, and they do all have a 3+ save. That being said, PCS I think are right in the points where they need to be, and they're phenomenal for their points for what you get, because you get a really good utility unit that can advance, that can do an action. If you carry a bolt rifle with them, which you should. They have a truckload of chainsword attacks. They got power fists. They have scouts. So they have a lot of really good utility that Assault Intercessors just don't have.
It's not the main reason why they haven't got nerfed, and this is outside of, you know, just my opinion on it. But I think Games Workshop is looking at the meta, and the meta is typically MSU armies that are doing well. And not all of them. There's sometimes that you have like the blob of the Crusader squads, but they're not performing at the high top levels. Most people are taking like the smallest, cheapest things to get different units into the list. And because they're a block of 10, 130 points, people aren't taking them in the high end lists for what they need. And so
Yeah.
Games Workshop is feeling that, hey, maybe they don't need to be nerfed because they're not being taken in these high finishing lists. But that doesn't say that they haven't been. There has been lists that have won tournaments that have had like a 20-man brick in it. So
Yeah.
they're just not consistent enough, I think, for them to take a look at them.
Yeah. I agree with that. The Going back to the Firstborn Crusaders, I think you're right. I think them going up to 85 means that I'm probably dropping them from my list, because for 85 points, I can get something else that's better than a single last cannon shot that I'm ideally pretty much just going to be using that. So something that will benefit the rest of my list better for those points. 75 was fine. 65 was too cheap. 85 is too much. So I'll probably be dropping them. I had like 3 squads in my in my Ironstorm list, which went up 70 points, by the way. So yeah. So let's scroll on down to Codex Space Marines and see what sort of changes it got. So as we come on down here, look at all that red on Necrons. Whew, my poor robots. All right, so not a lot of red. Eliminators randomly went up. I don't know why. Maybe because of the put 2 in an impulsor and shoot twice combo. But not a lot of people were running that. I really don't understand them going up 10 points. They're still good at 85 points. Um, I just don't understand where that came from. Do you have any thoughts, Bob?
It's all about the MSU. That's what it was. Get a cheap unit on objectives, spend the points elsewhere. And I think that's where it's kind of playing into. They're taking a beating on MSU, with some exceptions, which we're going to talk about right now.
Yep. So a unit that I like just went down 5 points. The assault intercessors with jump packs went down to 80 points per 5, 60 per 10. This is a great change. I love that they were already good in my book. This just makes them better, and it makes it so there's literally no reason at all to take Outriders because they're the same cost now. So, sorry, Outriders. You almost made it off my shelf, and then you didn't.
But did you really almost take them? Well, let's be honest.
I did have them in a list because they were 5 points. It saved me 10 points, so I could include something else. Um, but they promptly have been removed. Uh, so um, so yeah, the Brutalis went down 15 points. Um, uh, Grand Enforcer asked before we get to there, would you suggest running those in a 10 man or a 5 man? So, um, the both actually. So, two 5 mans is a great, or even one 5 man if that's all you have the points for, is like a great secondary unit to run around, do secondaries for you. They can clean up chaff. 5 man's not going to do enough damage to really take on a serious melee threat. Versus a 10 man, you pair them depending on what detachment you're with. I'd probably take them with a chaplain in Righteous Crusaders, and a captain in like Gladius or something. Um, and now the 10 man, plus the character makes them much more of a serious threat. They're still not going to be like sword bros or even terminators, but they will definitely deal some damage.
Like you have to consider that they're putting out the unit as a 10-man, 5 mortal wounds right off the bat. Plus, if you're using a chaplain, you're going to be using another 2.5. So
Mm-hmm.
7.5 mortal wounds on average rolling, right?
Assuming you
Right
can get them
away on
all
the
in,
charge.
you got to get them all in base to do that, but that's not super hard. Their bases are relatively small. 32 millimeters is fine. So, yeah, it depends on what you have points for and what you need them to do in your list because they can do both. All right, so the Brutalis down 15 points. He's now only 160. I think this makes him a lot more attractive. Um, Even out like we had if you watched our Firestorm video, we were running a pair of them in Firestorm because of the extra strength on the multi meltas, and it sort of made sense. But I think at 160 they're very usable outside of Firestorm. What do you think, Bob?
So I think that they are probably still a little bit fragile for what you get on them. So you have to have a very specific list setup to make them work. But 160 is very, very appropriately priced for what you get with them. I think this is what they should have been right out the gate about this level, 150, 160. So I think this makes them uh, a, a legitimate choice, I think, now in our lists for if you want to have that dreadnought option for you.
Yeah, and speaking of mortal wounds, they dump out mortal wounds when they charge. You can then use tank shock with them to get extra mortal wounds, which is pretty good. So, I think they're definitely worth considering if you need an extra melee threat. You can reserve them, so that way they have an opportunity to, like, you can hide them behind a building or something when they come in, and then you can charge whatever you need to when you need to. So, but yeah, they'll basically on a 2-up, you're gonna get at least D3 mortal wounds, which is nice. And if you happen to spike and roll a 6, it's D3 plus 3, which is gross. So, so yeah, I like them. I need to build the 2 that I own. I still haven't done that. And another surprise, Hellblasters went down 10 points. 115 makes them all that much more attractive. I liked them before, and I like them even more now.
Nice utility unit that does potentially quite a bit of damage. Um, going down in price, especially if you're running Gladius, is very attractive for their damage output. Even some of those other ones like um, Firestorm
Yep.
and Impulsors, those
Yep.
are
Riding
a
dirty.
fun take. Yep, you got to ride and dirty. So those are a fun unit. I think that going down in price was is nice for us.
Yep. Definitely. Over with Incursors, they went down 5 points as well. Um, they're fine, but for 80 points, I'm gonna take Assault Pack jump pack Intercessors. Um, because I don't know, Incursors, I want to like them. Their buff sounds good in theory, but I never can seem to find the points for them. I'd rather take something else. Thoughts on them, Bob?
I think this is kind of a throwaway one. And cursors can be taken, maybe like the odd like squad here and there, but I mean you're not actively going for them because we have infiltrators that we need to take, and then you also have scouts, which are significantly better. There is some select places where they might be a really good take, which is like the Vanguard. Um, out, actually investing in the unit more than a unit here and there. Um, yeah. Other than that, I think it's kind of just like a hey, no one's taking this unit, so maybe we should bring it down to make it so that the might be something that we take.
Kind of, maybe, sort of, maybe. Yeah. So moving on to page 2, the Storm Raven went up. A lot of you might be wondering, why did the Storm Raven go up? Is it that good? And the answer is no, it's not. At least not outside of a specific Dark Angels build in Ironstorm, no less, where they were taking 2 of them and dropping, a Redemptor off and Hellblasters with Azrael and whatnot. Plus, they also have that Shroud thing, so basically it was very, very hard to kill on turn 1, which means that it was guaranteed to get to where it needed to go turn 2. So yeah. So the Storm Raven pays for the sins of Dark Angels here.
Hi everyone, we both got cold, so
I just have that morning congestion going on, so.
yeah. So the Storm Raven is unfortunately going up. It's something that I want to like. I've tried to fit it into lists, but as Alex said, Dark Angels make the best use of it and
Mm-hmm.
make it very, very tough to kill. Where we don't have that ability,
Yeah.
uh, but it kind of coincides with the Brutalis going down. So if you use that combo,
You're
at
only
least you're
paying
not
a little bit
you're
more.
balanced out.
I think they went up 20 points. The Storm Raven did. So you're only going up 5 if you were using that combo. I don't know too many Black Templar players, at least based on our server, who were using it. So most people are using a Land Raider instead. So yeah, the tactical squad went down 20 points. No one cares because they're terrible.
We're talking about they're going in every list.
Okay, sure. You show me your tournament list with tac squad, and then we'll start talking. But in all seriousness, tacticals have never been good this edition, and they continue to not be good even at 140. Their ability is I can split into two 5-man squads. I don't care. I'll just take something that's a 5-man squad to begin with that has a better ability. I'd rather take incursors for 10 points more than, or really, 10 points more per 5 guys than tacticals because they're just not good. More importantly, both Terminator squads, assault and regular, went down 10 points. This makes several people in our Discord very happy, including our good friend David, as well as Crazy Tacos. I know both of them are Terminator aficionados. And to be honest, I like the Assault Terminator brick in Righteous Crusaders. It's a lot of fun. I played it at a RTT a couple months ago, and it's definitely fun, and I'm glad to see that they went down. That list that I ran, I've modified it, tweaked it a little bit since then. That list actually only went up 5 points, which means that I had to drop the Emperor's Champion and take a Judiciar instead for my second Sword Bro squad because the points drops from the Terminators balanced out the Sword Brethren points increases and tank increases. So yeah, really excited about this change.
This is the positive piece of the points updates in general, especially if you're leveraging the Terminators. Uh, Terminator squads are really the ones that were most prevalent. You don't see a ton of the regular Terminator squads, but this was the exciting one for a lot of people. They're still very relevant in the meta. It's tough to deal with some Terminators if you don't have the right toolbox kit, and so that may have even balanced out your Sword Brethren nerfs and your vehicles. So I mean, this is a nice change that I really enjoy. Um, that's we'll get into it a little bit, but I think that's really where Righteous Crusader needs to go, though, is going to be into those tough, durable units, and this is playing into that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew asked to balance core versus diversion, give the core chapters a discount on certain units. For example, White Scars and Stormlance get cheaper bikes and jump packs, for instance. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Tim asks, will our Castellan ever be unique to BT, and will Sword Bro in the PCS ever have the same stats as a actual Sword Bro? No one knows. I wish I knew. I wish they would do those things. The Castellan and the Marshall models are great opportunities that they're not taking advantage of to give us unique rules for them, and not just like one unique piece of war gear that isn't even all that good. And on top of that, the Castellan, there's no reason to take the Castellan because for the same points, the regular lieutenant has more attacks and better war gear options. So he really needs to have a special rule that's specific to BT to make him worth it, in my opinion. So as for the Sword Bro and the PCS, yeah, I don't think he needs 3 wounds, although that'd be nice. I would like him to have the same number of attacks as literally every other sergeant in the game. But if they would do that, I would be fine with that. If they gave him a 3rd wound, they'd probably have to increase the points a little bit, just because you can do some shenanigans with it. So
Agree. But it's not going to ever happen until we get a codex for sure. So they're not going to play around
yeah,
with the minutia in the units.
yeah, exactly. So moving on, a longtime favorite unit of mine. I have been talking about them since the start of 10th edition. The Vindicator went down 15 points. I've been saying that 190 was just a little too expensive, and a little bit of points drop would be great for him, and we got it. The Vindicator is awesome at 175. Awesome. Really good. It's durable. And the cannon on it is amazing. You can't tag it, it's blast, but you can't tag it in combat to keep it from shooting because the siege shield says I don't care. So yeah, really awesome. Glad to see this unit get a points drop because I feel like it definitely needed it.
This one's a very interesting one. So 190, I was like, yeah, this is still a little bit too expensive. 175, it's priced to sell. So this is going to be like, we got some extra points. Let's get one in there. And it's a great, I don't necessarily think you want to take two of them, but it's a great threat generator that can be both anti-monster, anti-vehicle. It could be anti-elite. It could just be a all-around threat that your opponent has to deal with, and it'll counter your Hellberg Brahms or maybe your Primaris Crusader squad, 20 mans, your Sword Brethrens. So it's just another threat that your opponent has to deal with. And while we have like Lancers and things of that nature that are also a threat, this one has shock factor. You know, when you're rolling D6 plus 3 um, shots that are all D6, it's significant. Um, it's a threat that your opponent really has to watch out for. And 175, I mean, let's be honest, most of us have 175, and the list towards the end that we could probably slip it in if it fits that list. So I think this is a unit that you should actually consider in many of your lists. This is it's a good unit for 175. I mean, a great threat saturation. If nothing else, it's a target that your opponent has to think about. 2 plus 11 toughness. I mean, it's pretty good.
Yep. Yep. I love it. I'll definitely be slotting it into more of my lists now. Um, Vindicators are amazing in Firestorm, yeah, because they have assault. They don't have a great move. I think they move 9 inches, and plus their 24-inch range. So that's not a huge range of stuff, but in Firestorm, being able to advance them and still shoot that gun is really funny. So yeah. And then last change for Space Marines is in the Iron Storm Spearhead Detachment, the Adept of the Omnissiah. That's the one that allows you to blank a damage incoming to a, I think it's a vehicle or a dreadnought, I can't remember which one. That went up, I think, 10 points. And then Master the Machine War, that's the one that allows you to fall back and still shoot. It went up 10 points as well. So Dark Angels were taking advantage of these, I think, in their lists, and that's why these went up. Um, so, um, so yeah. Um, so those are the points changes for Space Marines. Um, some good, some bad. Overall, what do you think of the changes for the MFM for us, Bob?
I think overall it's a net negative, but slightly. So most players, casual and even competitive, even though you don't see a ton of them in the list, um, are going to be hit by the Sword Brethren. This is what's going to, kind of make people kind of annoyed. I don't feel it was necessary. A lot of those top lists were not using them consistently. There was a few, but they weren't that like game changing. Yes, they can kill basically anything, but their balance was they're not terribly durable. You could have done the Hellbrick bomb and you can throw a lieutenant on it and give them Tannhauser bones and give them a little bit more durability, but a 5 up feel no pain is not reliable. It's just you're saving 33% extra wounds. I mean, yes, it adds on to it, but if you don't have other durability things on top of that, it's not really going to keep them around
Not when you don't have an
that
invul.
much longer. Yeah.
Yeah, not having an invul makes it so that, running T-bones with them is just sort of, a band-aid. It's not really going to help you as much as it helps a block of Terminators, for example. Um, so, so yeah, you can get some value out of it, but at the end of the day, you're putting a lot of points into one unit if you do that, because there's no point in doing it on a 5-man unit. You really want it on a 10-man unit, and a 10-man unit, in my opinion, is overkill, because it's going to destroy whatever it touches. A 10-man unit with Helbrecht and a lieutenant kills any unit in the game. So it's one of those things that, but at the same time, when you look at that unit, it needs a Land Raider, right? So it's 300 points now. Helbrecht is 120. The Land Raider, if you take the Redeemer, which you probably should, as much as I love my beloved Crusaders, now you're looking at what, almost 800 points, something like that. That's almost half your army in one unit, essentially. I mean, yeah, you have the Land Raider, but it's there to transport them. So, and it can do its own thing, so it's not entirely so, but really, that's still a lot of points wrapped up to focus on one unit. And if that Land Raider gets blown up turn one, that's a ton of extra points. So, I think you can still run a Land Raider because, a Redeemer is great on its own. And stick a 5-man with a Lieutenant in there since they won't fit into a impulsor. But I think a 10-man is too much. That extra 150 points could be better spent somewhere else, like Inceptors, a second Sword Bro squad somewhere else. That's how I would run them. And, there are still people who are taking the 10-man, and they are not having the same success as the smaller squads are in tournaments, from what I've seen.
It's just more consistent. You're reducing the price of them because that 5-man can kill basically the same amount of stuff. Now it does absorb damage, incoming damage better, but you're really investing in the unit and really building around it. And if your opponent has the ability to stop that unit, it's game over. And that's really the thing. In tournaments, if you lose one unit, you should not feel like you're out of the game. And playing against a 2,000 point list with only 1,000 points, just over 1,000 points, I mean that sucks. So you reduce that points by taking that 5-man with Halbert. They do just almost as much damage. Obviously, you add 5 more Sword Brethren, you just blow the lid off the game, but it's typically not necessary. Downside is, like I mentioned, you take some losses, then the unit dramatically gets worse over time. So it's basically pointed at the most dangerous thing your opponent has, or the most important thing your opponent has, and kill it, and then hope that the rest of your list can take it down, take down the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit more points intensive that I'm comfortable with, so I don't personally run them.
Yeah.
But
I'd rather
it
have
can be
spend
really
that
good.
150 points on a second unit that I can put in an impulsor and can go do something else. That's what I'd rather spend those points on.
Yeah.
Grand Enforcer asks, would they ever give them an invul, or would that make them too crazy? I think that make them too crazy. You would make their points too high for what they're capable of. They'd probably catch a nerf on their ability in that case. In which case, because I mean, we already have Blade Guard, um, and Blade Guard have a decent ability, but they're also limited to 3 to 6 man. So I don't foresee them ever getting an invul, and that's fine. They don't need one. They are the spear tip. They are the scalpel. They are not the anvil. That's what we have terminators
Yeah.
for, and
Yeah.
20 man
And
blobs.
I really don't want them to have an invul. I feel like they should have a weakness. Um, A, to keep their points down, and B, to thematically kind of go around their lore and what they do. They are offensive powerhouses. I equate them to being Space Marine incubi, honestly. So they go and murder something, and then if you're not careful with them, they're gonna die. So you have to be very strategic with them, and that's really the role that they play. They trade up into literally anything, um, as long as you have a character. Because if they don't have a character, then they're just 2 damage Space Marines.
Yeah,
So we get that anywhere. So you have to have that character with them, in whatever
and
variety
you have
that
to
you choose.
choose the right character for them, right? Obviously, Helbricht is the most obvious choice because he's already good. He makes them better with his, crits on +1 strength and crits on fives. So if you can get them lethal or sustained hits, now they're getting them on a 5+, which is amazing. But they make him much better in return too. All those sweep attacks being damaged too with Helbricht, is absurdly good. And that's why the Emperor's Champion is also absurdly good with them because he has that sweep attack. A marshal or a captain with them also really good. You can use his once per game. I can't never remember the name. The thing where he gets extra attacks. 3 extra attacks is pretty awesome to increase the damage there. The Judiciar works really well with them too. Gives them fights first, makes them super deadly, and gives him the some extra oomph in his attack power. Giving an extra damage to his weapon is pretty good. so so yeah,
And
uh,
you can enhance them too. So
yeah,
that gives them even more. If you got the extra points, you can put some enhancements in them.
yeah, like Perdition's Edge, which is a great buff for him. Finest Hour, thank you, sellers. Carson asks, is a 20-man Crusader squad viable? 100%. If I'm taking a 20-man, I'm sticking Grimaldus with it. That's what really makes it viable. So it's expensive. It's 400 points, but you've got a 24 model unit that is almost always going to have a feel no pain. I say almost always because there will be some times when you're going to switch that to like AP or something. It rerolls all hits because of Grimaldus. It gives a reroll advance and charge rolls. So if you need to get somewhere fast, you're going to be able to do so. And then don't forget the servitors. So the servitors, they can advance and charge with Grimaldus' ability too. That's also very nice. But the servitors, a lot of people, we actually had a lot of questions about this, and maybe I'll make a Templars tips on it. So there are 3 servitors in the unit, and they have the same stats, the same abilities, I should say, as Grimaldus. So, according to the datasheet, they have a 3-up save. They have a 4+ invul, because that's on the datasheet, not Grimaldus. And they also have the 5-up feel no pain. So, you only need 1 servitor alive to be able to activate that ability. So, you can use the other 2 as ablative wounds. So, it's like, oh, I got a big, scary AP3, AP4 shot coming in that will kill, potentially several Marines. Well, let's start on those servitors with a 4++. So, you can potentially tank several wounds on them, especially if you roll hot on those invuls, and, keep the actual Marines alive longer, because you only need one guy in order to be able to um, activate that ability. So something important
Yeah,
to
that's
remember.
important. Yeah, that's definitely important because that's a big change from the previous renditions of Grimaldus. Is the servitors were tied to each of their rules. So if you know kill one of them, then you lose that portion of the ability. Now that's not the case. You just have to have one alive to get the whole access to the artifacts. So that's important. But I will say, in answering that question as well, is the 20-man Crusader viable? If you're talking about the Primaris Crusader
Yes.
squad, yes, there has been several high finishing slash tournament win lists that have featured a single 20-man Crusader squad, and that's all that they take in that the battle line uh, portion of their list. And they don't necessarily have character attachment to them. They are good to clog up the whole center of the board or an objective and just say, "Hey, this is mine for the rest of the game." So, I mean, if you're farming points, 4 points a turn off of that, or whatever it may be, depending on the mission, that's good. Um, They're not too expensive, 280 points. They are a huge threat, even by themselves without character support, are a huge threat to your opponent. They don't want to just willy-nilly charge something towards you because you're gonna either counter charge and you can probably even still, even without everything getting into close combat, chain it so that you can still be on the objective. Um, so they have a lot of play, I think. Toy Mans. Initially, in the beginning of the list, there was some concern from some players. Are you going to be able to get up into close combat to make them all viable? I think that is actually a boon now that we've seen how the game plays out. You can pull. While there isn't as much movement shenanigans in assault and close combat as there used to be in previous editions, this is a unit that you can play that game with. You can do that because you have so many bodies. Coherency is a little bit tougher with them, just making sure that everything is in coherency, but it's a very good unit. Um, that's something that you potentially could consider in any list, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm trying to work it into Righteous Crusader list that I've been working on as well. Plus, it's just fluffy, right? It's lore appropriate and it's good, which is always a win in my book. So, Tim asks, does the repulsor look more viable now as a transport due to impulsors going up to 90 points? I don't think it looks more viable. It's certainly viable. It's fairly cheap at 200 points. It's fairly durable. Land Raiders are just better, especially the Redeemer. It is 60 points more for a Redeemer, so there is that. Um, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve from it, right? I don't own the models because I don't like the model for it, to be honest. So I don't own one. I've never really thought about including one in a list. Um, but it would actually unironically be decent in Ironstorm as a transport slash alternative to a Gladiator Reaper. We talked about, if you guys watched that video, we talked about the Tech Marine plus the Reaper plus the Mercy is weakness combo. It has the same Gatling cannon, it's just not twin linked. So you do lose a bit of the dev wounds because you're not going to be able to re-roll those wounds, but it also does have a crap ton more other guns to make up for that, and getting sustained hits one on all those guns. It also wouldn't get the sustained hits two because that's the ability for the Reaper, but that would be a solid take in that if you wanted to do that instead of the Reaper. Sort of a combo budget Reaper plus transport. I don't think it's a terrible take. Personally, for me, like I said, I don't like the model, so I don't own it. So I don't really consider it that often. What about you, Bob?
I think it's a viable unit, honestly. It's always been viable. It's an upgunned Land Raider, essentially, in the amount of shots that it has, but it's cheaper. But its quality of guns is not quite as good as like the Redeemer. So, like the Redeemer, you can Overwatch and eliminate an entire squad with the flamers, and it just proofs. Whereas the repulsor, you have to roll obviously, and then chances are that they're going to be sticking around. Um, so if you're on a budget and your points are tight and you can't afford Land Raider points wise in your list, you could do this. Um, I personally just prefer the impulsors because again, I play MSU. That's what's been effective. That's what continue is going to be effective in lists. Um, so I'm still sticking with my impulsors in general in most lists, but the repulsor has always been viable if you wanted to use it. I just think in combination with my list that I use, I would never do it, but doesn't mean you can't. They have shown up in tournament lists in higher finishes, so there's that.
Yeah. Um, Plus, if you don't need and you want to spend a few more points, the Rep E is not a terrible platform either. Um, it does have a pretty good gun. Neither one of them are bad anymore. They used to be terrible. I don't know. For me personally, it's not an option because I don't own the model, so I don't usually consider it.
Yeah, I'll plug Boonhammer here. A while back, they did do the math for a lot of the weaponry on our transports for Space Marines, and um, the, the Executioner actually scored fairly well,
Yeah.
as well as
I still think a
the
Lancer is
Repulsor.
better because it has the innate rerolls, which the um, uh, Repulsor Executioner does not, even though it's a gun, theoretically deals more damage. So, yeah. Speaking of plugs, we definitely want to plug one of our business partners, our Baron of Dice. He sells all kinds of amazing dice for 40K and other games too. And he carries our Implausible Nature dice. You can also, if you're a Patreon member, buy our Patreon exclusive dice. We are working on doing a new set of dice, so keep an eye out for those. As soon as we've finalized a design on that and get that rolling, we'll be sure to let you guys know. I'm pretty excited about what we have coming from them. We've also been talking to him about making dice bags for us. So we're gonna be having some new merch coming soon. So keep an eye on that. Make sure you're using discount code IN40K when you're buying dice from him. We also have an affiliate link in the description. Click on that to support us and make your purchase through Baron of Dice. So yeah. So what else what are you thinking, Bob? There's a lot of changes on other armies too. We can kind of cover some of those. Some of the boogeymen took some major nerfs, including, while it doesn't look like it on the sheet, Custodes really took it on the chin. For they have all points drops on their sheet. I can pull it up if we want to, but more importantly, their codex is not very good. They were one of the really tough matchups for us because we like to focus on melee and they're just better at it. So they did lose the restrictions on their squad sizes, but they also lost a lot of durability in their new book, and they lost, importantly, access to fights first on a stick, which they had regularly. Now I think it's like just a once per game strat that they can use to get it. So, or something like that. So, what are your thoughts on some of the other armies that we typically face that, you know, may have either easier or harder matchups for us now.
So I think Adeptus Custodes is going to be one of those lists that potentially in a few months will be something that we might have to watch out for once someone unlocks the list, because there's a lot of nuances in that book. Yes, it's not going to be a point and click army anymore. So you don't have the automatic fights first. You don't have the durability of those mortal wound protections. Um, but they have a lot of tricks in their book. So I think that there might be something to watch because they still have the stat lines that are really good. They still have rules that are very good. I think someone has to get that right build, and I kind of equate them to the Ultramarines Vanguard list. So we had that codex, the Space Marine Codex, out for months before someone decided, hey, this is it, and John Lennon, maybe one of those Art of War guys that was like, hey, this is the list, and then it just dominated tournaments. So that's, I think, is going to happen one of those days, because the book itself, while on the surface is a nerf to what they had, I think they have a lot of tools that potentially is going to make them good. And then if you look at the points drops that they got significant points drops. So
Yeah, we can
they're price to
let's back
sell.
up. Let's scroll back up. Let's take a look at custodes. Points drops. Yeah, notice Chaos Demons, nothing. Got absolutely no changes. Adeptus Custodes. That's Mechanicus. Yeah, look at this entire left side, just nothing but drops. So they got a lot. In fact, their entire codex got points drops. None of the Forge World stuff got touched or the enhancements, but everything else went down. Trajan went down, I think, 30 points. He's 150 now. I think he was 180.
Yeah, and he's still very good.
Yeah, people lamenting because he's he got he got hammered with the Nerf bat. 30 points is a justifiable drop for how hard they hit him. He lost the ability to ignore all modifiers. He lost, I think, fights first. So his ability to really impact the squad went down significantly. But yeah, everything went down. The entire codex went down. So it's interesting. I looked through some of their detachments. Honestly, I wasn't really impressed with most of it. It's going to be tough. They're not going to get a ton of great bonuses. They're going to be susceptible to mortal wounds and devastating wounds again. So they're not quite as the boogeyman as they used to be, I think, for us.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, until that one list comes out, and then it's gonna take the meta by storm. I can't predict what that's gonna be. I don't obviously play them,
Yeah.
but there are lists that seem to, even though that they're nerfed into oblivion, seem to stick around and then just annoy you.
They're like a bad
I
rash.
hate,
They just
I
keep
hate,
popping up.
I hate those stupid yellow guys. This
I
mustard,
can't stand
yellow,
the custodes.
banana.
The
I
banana
hate
men.
them. I hate them. And
I
I
don't
know
like
what
them
it
either.
is, and I think it stems from that stupid short story that they came out with during the Gathering Storm, where they killed all the Gray
Oh
Shields, and
yeah,
it just ever since then it's just been like,
the
oh, I
brazen
hate them.
the
I hate
brazen
them.
drakes, where he kills the entire an entire room full of brazen drakes by himself, like such a Mary Sue story. In any case,
Uh, well, we do have a couple questions here.
yeah,
So, given the great disappointment in all the recent codices, are you actually wanting a Templar Codex? The answer is yes, but give it a year
yeah,
or
yeah.
two,
I don't
because
know if we want it right now, or anytime soon. I think I agree with Bob. We want like a year to really kind of let this settle in, because I think that all these books, 10th has been out what, not quite a year,
Almost a year.
almost a
Almost a
year,
year.
and these books like Custodes, however you pronounce it. Um, this book was probably written before like a year ago, because the lead time to print these things, like you need 6 months of production just to make the books. And this is the problem with the way GW drip feeds codexes and printing physical books, that kind of stuff. To me, honestly, like a physical book should be uh, lore. It should just be, sure you can include the things, but they should sell digital copies and then errata the book, so that they don't have this problem. But in any case, I'm pretty sure this book was probably written over a year ago before 10th even started. So, um, you know, I want our book to be written within the edition, not before the edition. I don't know if that's how they do things, but yeah, I think I agree with Bob. Give it a year. Um, and then Garrett asks, any insight on how precision works with Grimaldus? So, sure. So, Grimaldus is him and his servitors are a character unit. However, only Grimaldus has the character keyword if you look at their keywords. This is important because when you're utilizing precision, precision only works on character models. So even though, when you target a character or target a unit with a character in it, it's considered a character unit for things that trigger off that, like anti-character or something like that. Grimaldus himself is the only one with that keyword. What this means is the servitors become part of the bodyguard unit, so you cannot allocate to them with precision. They'll allocate directly to Grimaldus, which conversely means that because they don't have the character keyword, you can allocate to the servitors, like we talked about a few minutes ago. Actually, you just must have just missed it, where you can utilize their 4-up invul and 5-up feel no pain to tank wounds for the squad, because they're not characters. Because the only way to allocate to a character is through precision. The owning player can never allocate to a character. So hopefully that clarifies that there for you.
Unfortunately, that is one of the weaknesses of Grimaldus, though, is precision really bounces him pretty hard if your opponent has a lot of it.
Yeah. Um, that being said, though, there's not a ton of like crazy precision out there. So, I think it's one of those things that is not something that we need to be too scared of. Also, they have to have line of sight to him. So, since he's not exactly, an amazing beat stick, monster character that like Helbrecht is, um, you can kind of keep him out of line of sight. But but yeah, I mean, he does have a 5-up feel no pain, which is pretty nice. So yeah, he can potentially tank some wounds, but you can just as easily keep him out of line of sight. So another boogeyman army out there, Codex Necrons. What do you think of these changes, Bob?
I think they have targeted a couple units in the list, and it's not enough. So obviously, all the Catans are going up slightly, and
The
Monolith is going
the
up
Trans
slightly.
Catan only went up 10. I'm kind of shocked by that because you can run 3 of them. Um, so yeah, that one kind of shocks me. I'm honestly surprised none of the Catan are over 300 points. Um, so, you know,
They basically only did anything with the Hypercrypt Legion,
and Canoptek.
which um, I mean understandably, because that's really the list that is really kind of the dangerous one right now. But
Hmm.
it's really not enough. Like, okay, my list is going up 40 points. Ooh,
Well, I think it's going to go up a
okay.
lot more than 40 points because if you were running the Nightbringer, several T-Catans, the Monolith, like the Nightbringer went up 40 points by himself. The Monolith went up 25. If you're running multiple T-Catans, then that could be 20 to 30 points. Um, Saraz went up 15. Um, Immortals went up a little bit. Um, the Dimensional Overseer, which was stupid cheap at 10 points, that's the one that lets them put a fourth unit in reserves, went up 15 points. I mean, you're looking at, potentially a lot of the competitive Hypercrypt lists probably went up 100 points or more. So that's significant. That's a real unit that you're dropping. Um, so so yeah, I think I guess
The
we'll
benefit
see.
of the benefit of the Necron Codex is they have alternative choice though. So
True.
like they don't have to take the Nightbringer. They don't have to take the Void Dragon. They could go into the Transcendent Catan. They could go into potentially the Deceiver, though he's not quite as good. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a really good detachment.
It is a really good detachment. And so is the Canoptech Court, which also took a pretty big hit. Surprisingly, race didn't go up at all, but they instead increased because they said that, I guess there was a video, Josh, whatever his name is, Josh Workshop, um, who's the new, like, meta game designer guy who's in charge of competitive play. Um, it said that the race were really only a problem with technomancers. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, certainly giving them the 5-up Feel No Pain is really, really good, as well as whatever enhancements you're going to give him. So the Technomancer went up 25 points, which is, on the one hand, okay, yeah, if you were running 18 wraiths, that's 75 points that your list just went up. But at the same time, the Technomancer can go with other units. So now you're nerfing his ability to go with warriors who were already borderline not worth it anymore because, they destroyed reanimation protocol buffs for the army, which admittedly, uh, you know, unkillable blocks of Lichguard and warriors was not fun, but they literally nerfed every single aspect of reanimation protocols for those two units into the ground. So, that makes it really hard to justify running those units anymore, which is supposed to be the backbone of the army. Plasmancer, Chronomancer both went up a little bit as well. Those were popular takes as well. So, so yeah, I don't know. I think they may have gotten off light. I'm surprised that, to be honest, I think the real answer is limit the number of Catan that can be in a list. I think that's going to be the real answer to spamming them because people who want to spam them are still going to spam them, and it's still a stat check on the opposing army. And if you can't deal with it, you're just going to lose. So I think their Catan need to be maybe max 2 in a list, maybe even max 1. Because in the lore, they're not busting these things out willy nilly, you know what I mean? So it would make sense to limit them, and then that would solve the problem immediately. So, what do you think?
But then build the Codex. I think you don't want to go too far with them. Yes, that'll rein in that particular detachment. But then what do you have? Because the Hypercrypt got some targeted nerfs again. Um, the other ones are not nearly as good in performing. It's really the transdimensional that's really been holding up the faction. And if you take away the Catan, there really isn't a ton of value in it anymore. Um,
Well,
so I don't want to go too far.
then you have to readjust and bring back some of the buffs to make warriors good again, to make immortals good. Those are some of the things you unnerf the monolith. That kind of stuff to make the other units, more worthwhile, to take. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, people are still going to run three Catan lists. You know, it's 900 points now instead of like what 800, 700, 775. So, it's still going to happen. They're still going to stat check people. They're just going to be one real unit less than what they were, and they're going to carry on. So,
What we're really going to be seeing a lot of is orcs. That's going to be what we're going to see a lot of. I guarantee it.
yeah, I haven't had a chance to peruse the Orc Codex, but from what I understand, it's pretty good.
It is very flavorful. All of their detachments are good. Um, there are some very big boogeymen that can go with it. One of the lists that you're probably going to see the most of. So all of y'all that are watching are going to need to be prepared for this. Get your screening units out now. Um, I forget the name. Don't hold me to detachment names or any rules, but there is. You have one detachment that has big mechs that you can take as the focus, and you can do the WOG twice in it. And so they changed the WOG. So when you're in a WOG, you feel no pain and invulnerable save with the big mechs. And they advance a charge, get additional buffs. So basically, you're going to have a 180 point big mech unit that's maxed out. That's unkillable. Unkillable. Um, Now, the benefit is they don't do quite as much damage as you want with them. Um, but when you have a unit that is unkillable, they do decent damage. But you can log twice. They're going to be in your lines first turn if you deploy very well. Uh, Second turn, so it's really good. Then you have other lists that the speed freaks are pretty good. On the list there, the what are their names?
And look at all this
Uh,
green. That's a lot of points drops. Now maybe that's relevant or I don't know, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. In comparison to what their codex points were versus the last MFM. I don't know. I'm not an orc player, but that's still a lot of green. So
yeah, they're going to be very good. So this is a list that you're going to want to familiarize with. Watch some reviews. Forgive me, I don't know other names because I'm not a filthy Xenos player. But let's
don't you
uh,
own a Drukari army?
shush. But this is definitely an army we will probably have to do a review on, honestly, as a in our new series, how to face these guys, because this is going to be something that's going to be in the meta really fast, and they're going to be very strong. I think these are going to be the new Elderai, honestly.
Really, you think they're gonna be that good?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, so speaking of which, what what do you think? And we have a upcoming video, which we won't spoil. But what do you think? I know a lot of those Righteous Crusaders is the most played detachment, mainly because it's fluffy. It's our flavor. but it's really about like 48%. You mentioned earlier that you think we're going to have to tilt a little bit more into durability for Righteous Crusaders. Um, what do you think that looks like from a list building perspective? Where are we going to be?
This is my opinion, so take it as that going forward. But my opinion is to utilize Righteous Crusaders going forward, we need to utilize things that are durable in the list. So terminators, 2+ saves, invulnerable saves, things that will stack with our uphold the honor vow, um, and keep our units around longer. So that's really where we need to be now because of our points drops that we have. So in the list that I typically ran, I ran MSU, um, even with the Registered Crusaders, with the exception of I had a couple of primary Crusader squads in there. So technically they're not MSU, they're 10 mans, but um, we really want to flex into the durability thing because there's other detachments out there that do the damage thing better with the smaller units now. Um, so what does that kind of look like? Terminator squads, I mentioned before, they went down in points significantly, so that's even more of a boon for us now. So taking that block of 10 with either the chaplain that we've made videos about to give it that extra durability, or you could go with the captain or even the ancient to give similar abilities. Um, is an awesome start. We talked about earlier in the stream the 20-man crusader. I think that's something that you really need to look at into this list, for the righteous crusaders. Things that we can keep alive for as long as possible that still benefit from our detachments and the enhancements. That's where we need to go. I'm even though the points are still a little bit high, even so much going into switching out um, some of my vehicles like the Lancers and such to going into um, ballistas. So you utilize that the 2+ on there, and even the Redemptor. So that's something that I'm kind of looking at doing. It's 210 points for a Redemptor, but you still get that -1 damage. You still get the 2+ save, and that
It's
extra
definitely more
durability.
durable than a Lancer is, although it doesn't definitely put out nearly as much damage output. But it can potentially stick around longer for sure.
So I think that's where we kind of need to focus our attention on. Um, yeah, we can do the spike damage when we want to do it, and that's what we have to kind of focus on, is doing that spike damage in opportune points of the list. But we need to stick around as long as possible. So our units need to be geared towards how can I leverage as much 2+ and or invulnerable saves in my list as possible. And I think that's really where we need to go with Righteous Crusaders.
Yeah, I really like the points drops for Terminators. That helps us out a lot, especially because ours are extra durable and can be extra deadly. You mentioned the Chaplain and the Ancient. David is really high on the Ancient right now because of the extra OC. He says that has swung games for him, having that block have that OC. They're not quite as deadly, but I did some math on it, and so the Ancient, once you're down below starting strength, the Ancient gives you +1 to hit, versus the Chaplain just gives always a +1 to wound. Um, those aren't quite equivalent depending on what you're attacking. The Chaplain is better into higher toughness stuff. Um, Everything, the lower toughness stuff, the +1 to hit equals it out. Now, obviously, as the squad whittles down and is below half strength, which half strength would be when there's 5 models left, because it's an 11 model unit, um, and half of that is 5.5, so you round up, so 6. So 5 models is you get the +1 to wound from the ancient. So that at that point the scales tip obviously to the ancient, which makes them more dangerous as time goes on. But plus they have the OC to stand on an objective, and do a little bit better there. So I definitely see his reasoning there, but it's hard not to take a chaplain because he's so cool. That being said, it's kind of they're the same points, so play around with what you like, and see what you want to do. And so Grand Enforcer says, so is Alex going to change his mind on Blade Guard then? Nope. My Blade Guard have been sitting on the shelf all edition. I will still be running Sword Bros even though they're not as durable. Just because, I don't know, Blade Guard, they just don't do it for me. Sword Bros are much, much cooler. And much more deadly. Which we still need some units that are really deadly, so even if they're not quite as durable. So my thoughts on that. And yes, I wish Assault Terminators would get a new upscaled model. I'm torn between just buying third-party bits and making my own, or waiting for the new models, which inevitably will come. I can't imagine that they won't. It's just a matter of when.
Alex, they're coming. My prediction. I'm going to put this down. It is stamps because all these talking heads, they're like, oh yeah, they're going to be in the Dark Angels. Oh yeah, they're going to be in this. I predicted 6 months ago, we had the stream is what would you like coming in as our unique unit? And I said, Sword Brethren Terminators. Just watch. It's going to be them.
Hopefully they don't suck as bad as Deathwing Knights. So.
But real talk though. Okay, so you kind of stuck around with us for an hour and a half now, and we got a real talk, right? I'm the realist, optimistic person, but I still base my advice in realism. Black Templars took a big hit with this points nerf. I think this is going to eliminate Black Templars in Iron Storm completely. You're going to have some stragglers that are going to try and make it work with different vehicles. And there probably will be some success here and there, but it's not going to be nearly as what it's going to be the outlier. Kind of like how the Righteous Crusader was a little bit of the outlier in the tournament wins. So it's going to be significantly dropped. We're very hurt by this in Ironstorm. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to shift to a few different things. Firestorm didn't take too much of a hit on this, actually. Ironically, I think you mentioned that your list went down 40 points or 50 points or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like I ended up, I don't know if it was short points before or not, I can't remember, but when I pulled it up after I updated new recruit, it was 55 points shy, so I slapped a apothecary in there with my Hellblasters.
So I think we're gonna do well with the Firestorm. I think Gladius is going to be sticking around to stay, and I think honestly we are going to see a big hit on our Righteous Crusaders. Unfortunately, a lot of it is indirect that we got, so we utilize those vehicles that went up 5 points each, and now 170 point Lancer is kind of expensive. It takes out a vehicle and it takes out a monster, but it doesn't participate in anti-infantry. It doesn't do any of those other things. Now you have to seriously consider is that too much for us? Is it a little bit too expensive? Um, I still like it at 170 points, but it's hard to validate now when you're trying to squeeze those last little bits. Um, but then you also have the big increase on your Soul Brethren. If you're playing an MSU like I did, that's also hurts. The Impulsors, that hurts. So there's ways around it, and I think that we can figure it out and get the play on Righteous Crusaders. Like I mentioned, go durability route or um, more rock unit esque with the Hellbrick Bomb, that type of thing. There's ways around it. I think that foot-based Templars might have some play there, going into the Primaris Crusader squads who weren't touched. Um, so I think there's that route that we could go to do it. But I think we're going to see a 5% decrease in wins. Overall, we're going to be probably sitting around the 50% mark, 48 in Righteous Crusaders versus the 55 that we were. And obviously, Ironstorm is going to be killed. I don't think uh, Gladius was hurt that bad, though. So there's that option. Though I think you've mentioned in places that Alex, you prefer not to go Gladius because you think it's boring.
It is boring. Um, I mean, it has some interesting things in it. I don't know. Righteous Crusaders is by far my favorite detachment for obvious reasons. I love the lore. I do also like to be competitive. Obviously, it's why we run this channel. But it's uh, something that I've really liked about Righteous Crusaders is, that it has good strats. It focuses on what we like to do, which is melee. Um, but Gladius does that well too, and in some ways better than ours, because you have also options for shooting. Um, so um, so yeah, so I mean, I do like Firestorm a lot. It seems very fun. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I do like its abilities and whatnot, and I feel like it feels like Black Templar too. Um, so so yeah, it's gonna be one of those things. I think I looked at Stat Check, the Meta Stat Check website the other day, and we were, if you break it down, Ironstorm was the highest at like 65%, and Firestorm was up there too, but Righteous Crusaders was not that high. It was like 48, 49%. So it was within the Goldilocks zone, but it was sub 50, I believe. I'd have to go look at it again. I think it's going to drop a little bit more. It is also the most played detachment. So because of that, we're going to get more accurate numbers. However, you're also getting like people who are not really tournament players that are going to tournaments just for fun, and losing with that because they don't care. They're just going to have fun, which is totally fine way to do it. But those people who are not like trying to be the most competitive possible, um, kind of skewing those numbers. It's the same thing with Space Marines. If you look at Space Marines numbers, it is the worst army in the game. If you look at vanilla Space Marines, they are at the bottom. It's like 42%. Um, the thing about that is, though, is the best players who are winning with Space Marines aren't playing vanilla. They're playing BT and Dark Angels with vanilla detachments. Even Space Wolves, to a certain extent, Blood Angels, right? They're playing one of the Divergent chapters. And this is sort of what we talked about earlier. The Divergent chapters are basically like Space Marines plus extra. Um, so I don't think that Space Marine stats is really indicative of the faction as a whole. It's more that the players who are playing top level competitive games aren't running. They're falling into another category. They're falling into the Black Templars or the Dark Angels or the whoever category instead of vanilla Space Marines, even though what they're really doing is they're running Iron Storm. So, it'll be
I
interesting
listen.
to see how it shakes out, with Righteous Crusaders. But I think you're right. I think we need to tilt into durability, because that's something that detachment does well with Uphold, Tannhauser's Bones, things like Terminators, Vindicators, that kind of stuff. I think will help that.
And I think it's interesting notes. I pulled up the stat check for the list, so obviously it's not on the screen here because it's on my computer. But an interesting uh, stat that is here, and I think it's going to change here real quick. Is one of the things that they track is the 4-0 event start for each of the players that are in each detachment, right? So Iron Storm, Firestorm are 10% 4-0 starts for the players over all of the players that have been playing. That's reported. I mean, that's really good. And then you have
Yep.
Gladius, which is 12%. So 12% of all players that take a Gladius detachment start 4-0 in tournaments based on their stats. Then you look at the Righteous Crusaders, and part of this is going to be player population, but it's only 3%. And when we take an indirect nerf, 3% win rate, 4-0, that's going to be significant. But when you also look at the role here is 2% of the player population is player count 129 um, for Righteous Crusader versus the Gladius is 67 and 58 for the latest data set. So you combine
Double.
both Ironstorm and Gladius, and you get as many Righteous Crusaders. So that does play a little bit of it in there. So as you were talking about the new player or the casual player, um, or someone like me who's basically been playing Righteous Crusader, going for that Righteous Crusader in the tournament, um, brings down the win rate because obviously not everyone can win, especially if you're facing mirror matches, which is much more common nowadays in the Black Templar uh, life that we are now living, because we are much more popular in the tournament scene. So,
The Black Templar
so it's just,
life.
yeah, yeah. So it's not something that you used to see having so many Black Templars players. You go to every tournament and there's 3, 4, 5 Black Templars players. On our Discord, you see it in our Meta Watch that gets produced every week, and it's every big tournament is significant um, representation for the Black Templars. So I think it's great that we are bringing and representing. We have 6 tournament wins since 10th edition has been released, but
4 of those are Iron Storm, just to give you an idea.
yeah, 4 of them are Iron Storm.
Now, if you guys pull this up and look at this, you might think, oh, man, look at Firestorm, 57% win rate. But keep in mind, that's 65 games. So you can just throw that out because 65 games is not nearly enough of a data point to really consider it. Versus you look at Ironstorm 345, Gladius 368, Righteous Crusaders 689. 65 games is meaningless, right? You need 200 to 300 games played for that stat to be really meaningful, and be indicative of how the detachment's actually playing and weed out the ridiculous number of variables that come with 40k because when you look at the game as a whole, there is an absurd number of variables, including player skill, the dice, who your matchups are. It's really challenging to draw meaningful stats, and you need to have like a vast number of games to have a truly accurate data point. So, um, and even still, I mean, even if you combine these, we're only like over like 1,000, barely over 1,000 games, which, um, depending on which faction you look at, like if you looked at Sisters, who are technically number two in the meta, they have only over 1,000 games. Thousand Sons, same thing, only over 1,000 games, versus Necrons have 3,500 games. Custodes has 2,800 games. These are data points that you can really rely on, right? Because so many games have been played that it levels out some of the wild variants.
Yeah, even still, it's a good tool to use if you want to see what the state of the meta is. So
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
recommend taking a look at statcheck.com. You'll take a look at the stats. Now you can play around with the different things. So we're going based off of the most recent updates. So they purge old win rates after certain points. So you would have to edit that and add in those to get the current things. So since 10th edition, there's been many, many, many more games than 1,000. But they purge
Yeah.
those out because it's old
This
data
this
based
is
of
since now it doesn't include obviously the most recent one that just dropped because there's no way to, but it the numbers that we've been talking about are the meta is Leviathan 1.6. It's the Q1 2024 balance update and Codex Dark Angels. You can like historically go back. You can click on all if you want to, but it's kind of irrelevant to do so unless you just want to look at how we were doing in a different time period, because the meta has changed, the rules have changed. So looking at like all of 10th edition, unless you just want to see how many wins we have or something like that, is kind of you're not gonna get any kind of accuracy with how good the faction is currently.
So that's kind of my take on where we're going to be kind of playing. So I think we're going to shift to the Ironstorm players that were Ironstorm players. Honestly, if that's the only thing that they took, they wanted to take Space Marines, and that's what they were playing, and they're just automatically going. They're either going to shift to Dark Angels in black, um, and staying with the Ironstorm that way. But I still think we're probably going to see a 75% drop in use in that detachment. Um, but as far as Black Templars players go, I think most of us are going to be in Gladius um, competitively, or maybe Firestorm, and then a smaller contingent of us using the Righteous Crusader. I think we're going to, like I said, 5 to 10% win loss rate on the Righteous Crusader simply due to the indirect nerfs to Sword Brethren and the vehicles that we relied on. Potentially, that could even out once we develop a list that works with that extra durability, like the Terminators and such. So,
Which you can count
I
on that we
personally
will be
like the
doing.
Righteous Crusaders.
Yeah, and just for reference, so one of our two of our best players competitively in the tournament scene, David Anderson and Sasha, they've both been running Righteous Crusaders primarily. Now that may change with this most recent update, but David was still sharing lists with us that were Righteous Crusaders. So he hasn't given up. We're going to continue to, move forward with what we have available to us and see how we can make the best list possible, and hopefully test it out at a few tournaments. So we got a few minutes left.
Eventually,
What's that?
I was going to say, unfortunately, I'm missing a tournament that's going on right now in my new location that I moved to ahead of work. And I was like, of course, it's my weekend of work and I can't
Yeah.
go to this 100-person tournament.
Our in here in Atlanta, we have Warzone Atlanta GT this weekend. Our friend Patrick, who we've had on the channel a couple times as well, he's playing in that tournament. Although he's playing his heretical bugs. So, um, yeah, yeah, I teased him about it. But in any case, we've got a couple minutes left. If you guys have any questions that we can answer real quick before we sign off for the day. Um, so yeah. Overall, I think there's obviously some things I'm happy about, some things that we're not happy about. Um, at the end of the day, it wasn't like the end of the world. We could have gotten it a lot worse, I think. But I think what will happen is maybe we'll see BT switch away from the Iron Storm, which will maybe have GW relax some of this. I don't know. We'll see. I guess it just depends on how the meta goes and what happens, but it'll be interesting to see for sure.
I think we'll balance out still in the Goldilocks zone. We're certainly not going to be the top of the meta anymore, which I think is fine. Um, well, they finally got here. You know,
Uh, Arcadia says, I wasn't here from the start, but what do you think about replacing BT vehicles with alternative Land Raiders instead of Impulsors and Ballistus Predators instead of Lancers? Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been talking about that a little bit. Um, I'm still going to be taking Impulsors because they're just that good for Sword Bros. If you're not running RC, obviously you don't have to take those options, but for RC we do, and I'm still putting Lancers in my lists. They're that good. I like them a lot. But there's alternatives like the Ballistus Dreads. Vindicators are now only 5 points more, which are really good and can put out a lot of hurt. Slightly more durable than Lancers as well. They're tough 11 with a 2-up. So, it's I'm not we're not dumping them, but we may see less of them because of it.
I personally think that the alternatives are pretty decent. I mean, we may revisit the different vehicles and such in a video or a stream later on, doing a little bit of a re-rank. But there's nothing wrong with the ballistas. I has talked about in Righteous Crusaders. That's something that I'm looking to potentially do because I like the durability of the ballistas. It's 140 points. You're not going to get quite as much damage output from them because of the rerolls that you get from the Lancer, but you still get 4 quality shots that you can reroll hits against a target that's not half damaged. Um, so you're really only losing the rerolls to wound, which um, in some vehicles like the Predator Annihilator, you get the twin linked on that twin link las, which is a little bit stronger, and then you can reroll the 1 damage. So 130 points for that is not bad for what you get on it, and if it's targeting an oath target, that's something you could do. That's the other thing is these changes are going to make it so that oath is going to be more important for taking out those important pieces, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially
But I
when
think
taking
the
things that are
alternatives are
not
good.
Lancers. We'll need those rerolls.
Yeah, so I think the alternatives are good. They're not as good as the Lancers, but 170 points though is kind of expensive. So when you switch to a ballistic for both of them, I typically take 2 Lancers or did take 2 Lancers. I mean, I'm saving 60 points. now. So
Yeah.
I mean that pays for all of my increases. So
Yeah, exactly. Problem is I only own one ballistus because I just bought one set of uh, the Indomitus Leviathan, whatever it's called, Leviathan box. So, and now that the kit, big quotations because it's the same push fit model, is out, all the eBay prices have skyrocketed. So I got to try to find another one cheap.
I ended up picking up before the kit came out, and like I really like the model. Honestly, it's very simple to put together, which is a huge boon for me because I hate building models. Those that have been around long enough. Um, so it's fairly easy and it's very detailed. And honestly, the model is good on the board, and that's what's important to me. Honestly, I can overlook anesthetics a little bit, like
Yeah.
inceptors and things of that nature.
I
For
made Inceptors look better. I'm happy with mine. I reposed them and got rid of the stupid skis and yeah. So all right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today. We kind of went over a bunch of different things. Check out the rewatch if you need to. Don't forget to click all the YouTube algorithm buttons, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. That makes the engine run. We really appreciate it. It really helps us out to grow the channel, so we can reach more folks like you guys, to support with this. And thank you for all of our patrons. We really appreciate your support. We couldn't do this without you guys. And of course, all our viewers as well. That's why we're here. So do check out our Patreon, though. We've got a lot of great things, including YouTube exclusive, Discord exclusive roles, free merch, all kinds of good stuff, Patreon exclusive dice, and yeah, so also check out our Discord. Lots of great things going on there. Lots of great discussion every day. And until next time, keep on crusading.